Korthos Island is the first place any new player will see in Dungeons & Dragons Online, and likely the first exposure the player will have to Dito's storytelling experience. From Korthos Island, the player learns what it is to be an adventurer, in whatever capacity they deem fitting for their character, and first begins to explore the world that games developer Turbine originally showcased and Standing Stone Games continues to promote. Howdy-o, this is Rabbit of ScrubLeet Academy, and today I want to investigate the lore of Korthos Island. From the very beginning, the story alludes to the crash of the Heart of Wind, a House Lyrandar airship that the player, for whatever reason, has boarded. The Heart of Wind departed from the Mirror Holds on the continent of Corvair, and is bound for the city of Stormreach, ruled by 4 powerful individuals known as the Coin Lords, and a 5th, Harbor Master Zin, among the many houses who have made Stormreach a base of operations. The player awakens in the Heart of Wind's wreckage. As a new player, all they know is the beach of Korthos Island, and the decimation thereabout, and the rest of the plot they'll have to fill in later. As a returning player, they get to witness the Heart of Wind's journey over the vast Thunder Sea. In both cases, the presence of a frost dragon is something they can watch for if they keep their eyes to the sky. A shifty, rather crass rogue greets them on the beach, he likely looting the corpses and picking the cargo clean. The player follows him to a small encampment, where the rogue, Jeets, grants them a choice of weapons in order to help his comrade, Selimus. Talbron, a warforged ally of Jeets, guides the player to the grotto, wherein they find Selimus, a follower of the Silver Flame religion, at the entrance to a door. The player learns that Selimus' party, as she appears to be the leader, has been hired by an unknown contractor to deal with a Sohagan menace afflicting the grotto, and as the player comes to learn, the entire island. The exact hows and whys remain unknown, but Selimus assures the player that they do the work of good, that the party has been together through other trials and thus has experience, and that the Sohagan's consumptive culture is no good to either the player or the people of Korthos Island. The player comes to trust Selimus' judgment, and the powerful cleric casts a ward on the player while enlisting their help in clearing through to Korthos village proper. The player overcomes locked doors and ambush traps and, eventually, a Sohagan priestess who's casting some ritual at a vulgar shrine. After defeating the priestess, the party splits up, Selimus to cleanse the shrine, Jeets to take the loot, and the player to find a secret door through which they can all proceed to Korthos Island. Upon arriving at the village, the player learns that its denizens are beset by the Sohagan, who've claimed residence and have been harassing Korthos village's population. Furthermore, the once tropical Korthos is host to snow, perhaps for the first time in its history, and storm clouds shroud the island in a bleak light. Soon they meet Kaya Bowerdatter, a young village woman distressed by some wailing in the famous Hayton Tomb, where the heroes of Korthos village have been buried. The Hayton family, the player learns, are the reason that the Sohagan had never managed to gain a foothold in Korthos village before, despite their dominance over much of the Thunder Sea. However, when the last Hayton died, the Sohagan had no threats to stop them, and entered the tomb seeking fresh corpses for their reincarnation rituals. They sought to resurrect the very same Hayton family that had, for so long, stymied their efforts in seizing control of Korthos. The player meets Jacoby Drexelhand, the crypt keeper of the Hayton family tomb. After an awkward exchange with Drexelhand, who seems fairly nonchalant about the Sohagan presence, and outright favorable to the Devourer cultists, defective members of Korthos who joined the Sohagan out of religious zealotry or outright fear, the player moves to cleanse the Sohagan from the tomb. The player manages to stop the Sohagan from enacting their morbid rituals and lays to rest, for the second time, the bodies of the Hayton family. However, there's one missing, Lars Hayton, the foremost descendant of the Hayton line. The player reports as much to Kaya, who immediately begins to spread hope to the rest of Korthos village that they might yet have a savior in Lars Hayton. The player also learns of Vogel and Baldar's fight against the Sohagan, who came for their Caneth crystals. The crystals are said to have been able to fend off the ice caused by the presence of the Frost Dragon, implying that the dragon and the Sohagan are working together. Baldar was able to retrieve one crystal, but not without Vogel suffering severe injuries and Baldar himself being hurt too badly to protect it. Baldar asks the player to protect the crystal, as they expect an attack during the night when the village's defenses are lowest. The player accepts and successfully defends the Caneth crystal, buying the villagers some time to start a proper rebellion without worrying about freezing to death in the presence of the frost dragon. The player scours the village's storehouse for a scroll said to be written by Hayton, presumably about dragons. The player learns that a series of pests have infested the storehouse, however, and Linus Ware, the man responsible for enlisting the player's help, is unable to clear them out. The player finds spiders, but also reanimated rats, a byproduct of the Sohagan's meddling in necromancy. The player eventually comes across a Sohagan necromancer who'd gotten in by a sewage grate and tunneled into the storehouse. A shrine to the Devourer, a god omitted from the pantheon of deities known as the Sovereign Host, sits in the water. The player retrieves the scroll and returns it to Linus, who vows to find someone capable of reading it. While the player dealt with the issue of the Sohagan in Korthos Island, the Bowersons lead a full-scale plot of rebellion against the Sohagan menace, starting with the discovery of the traitor in their midst. Jacoby Drexelhand, who so callously disregarded the defense of Korthos village, has been conspiring with the Devourer cult and the Sohagan to kidnap and harry the villagers for the Sohagan's despicable ends. Sigmund Bowerson, the patriarch of his family and father to Kaya Bowerdatter, buys the player's continued allegiance and plans an ambush for Drexelhand. The player confronts Drexelhand later, but an ambush of cultists and Sohagan quickly forces the player to deal with the more pressing threat and allows Drexelhand to flee into Sigmund's basement. The player kills all of the threats and pursues Drexelhand, navigating a crudely dug tunnel system that unveils another means of entry into the village for the Sohagan, and a convenient location for Drexelhand to conspire with them. The player fights their way along the underground, eventually cornering Drexelhand in a small cave. Two Sohagan leap from a pool of water and join Drexelhand, but the player dispatches all of them before Drexelhand's collaborator arrives. After ridding the last of the Sohagan, the player returns to Sigmund, who seals off the passage beneath his inn in order to prevent more Sohagan from entering Korthos in such an unwelcome manner again. Things begin to shift for Korthos village. The villagers, once hopeless and struggling desperately against a vastly superior threat in the Devourer cult, rally behind the player and lend their full support to Sigmund's rebellion. The hope of a living, breathing, defiant Hayton grips the population, and the dawn breaks a little warmer, a little clearer, a little brighter. Korthos now has a fighting chance. If you enjoyed this video, comment. Do you like these kind of videos? Would you like to see some more of Dito's story in the future? Tell us what we might have missed and what your thoughts are on the story thus far. And as always, thank you so much for watching. For a quick summary of what happened so far, I'll leave you with this. The airship Heart of Wind crashes on the coast of Korthos Island. The player fights through Sohagan to reach Korthos village and learn what's going on. The player stops several Sohagan operations and learns of a connection between the Sohagan, their Devourer cult, and a frost dragon that may or may not be working with them. The villagers uncover a traitor in their midst, and the player finds and executes that traitor and several Sohagan cohorts, including a collaborator whose influence, when shattered, notably impacts the Sohagan's subtle efforts to dismantle Korthos village from within. The villagers rally, and Korthos village begins to fully dedicate itself to resisting the Devourer cult. The myth of Lars Hayton spreads, and the player gains fame as the most prominent rebel against oppression in Korthos village. Thank you all once again. Until next time, bye-bye for now.